Hola a todos, soy Javier Poveda y esto es De Bien TV, el canal donde te la vas a pasar de bien mientras aprendes geografía, historia e historia del arte. Y si no, te fusilo. Este vídeo para cuarto de la ESO de sección CEIPSO Encinar de Torrelodones. So, in this video we are going to study the second part of the Unit 7, which is the interwar years. And in this part we are going to study the totalitarian regimes, which took place in many countries of Europe, but mostly the most important ones in Italy, in the Soviet Union, and in the Nazi Germany. Okay, in which authoritarian dictatorships came to power, with the power concentrated in the hands of a supreme leader and one ruling political party. In these examples, Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler. Let's start. They have, most of these regimes have a common characteristics. First, we're going to see the causes, the factors that contributed to the rise of these regimes. Many soldiers found it difficult to adapt to civilian life after they returned from the World War I. Most of these regimes started right after or in the period, in the interwar years period, and many soldiers that had fought in the World War I, then they found many difficulties to get a new job. So they chose the most populist political choice, which made the totalitarian regimes came to power. The war had aroused nationalist feelings, mostly because in the defeated powers, the victorious powers took territories from the defeated powers, and this was reinforced by the economic crisis of 1929 and the implementation of protectionist policies. We have here a great example with a German demonstration against the Treaty of Versailles, which was a humiliation for the Germans. The power of the state increased with state intervention in economy and society during the crisis of 1929. This is a common characteristic of all these regimes, and new parties were formed that represented the working masses, which were discontented, mostly because of the high rates of unemployment. The fascists, the Nazis, and the communists. Let's go on. These totalitarian regimes share some common characteristics. A totalitarian dictatorships, this means that the power controls every aspect of the life of the individuals. Every dictatorship has a charismatic leader who possesses all the political power and a single political party supporting him. We have talked about this. Therefore, we have an anti-democratic government. All of these regimes refused or rejected democracy. So there was no need to have free elections or political parties or other political parties than the ruling one. In the foreign policy, they pursued an expansionist policy to gain new territories. In these countries, mostly the territories that had lost during the World War I. In economy, the state intervened and controlled the economy, mostly creating new companies, but mostly nationalizing the existing ones. And most of them in strategic resources, such as mines, railways, banks, and every company that extracts raw materials. And in society, almost all the classes of society supported the regime because they were controlled and informed by the state, and they believe that the system provided a solution to their problems. When people are desperate, they usually go after the easiest solution. In this case, the most populist solutions. So let's start, not yet, because here this is a map in which we have totalitarian regimes, in brown the right-wing regimes, in red the left-wing regimes, the communists of the USSR, and in green the remaining democracies in Europe, which were the less. So, first we are going to start with Stalinism, with the USSR. Stalinism is the system that applied in the USSR after Lenin's death in 1924. After him, Joseph Stalin came to power, and he eliminated all the possible political rivals within the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, because remember that in the USSR the only legal party was the Communist Party, and his main political rival was Lev Trotsky. First he was exiled, and later he was killed in 1940 by an agent of Stalin in Mexico. So, the characteristics of Stalinism. All the political power was held by him, he controlled the CPSU, and in the Soviet Union he approved the Constitution of 1936, which granted citizens' rights such as universal suffrage, because there were elections in the Soviet Union, but all the candidates were part of the Communist Party. So he maintained the CPSU as the only political party, of course, and he tried to spread communism across Europe through the Comintern, the Third International. Remember, that was created in 1919, because it coordinated, well, it controlled the rest of the communist parties in Europe. Okay, we have studied this in the previous unit when we talked about the Russian revolutions. The economy was planned because it's a socialist state, so therefore it's controlled by the state. The means of production, los medios de producción, land and factories became state property, and Stalin controlled the economy. He abandoned the new economic policy that Lenin established. Instead of, it was replaced by the 5-year plans, los planes quinquenales, starting in 1928, which aimed to achieve the rapid industrialization of the USSR. And they were a success, okay? In these plans, the state set objectives of production for each of the branches of the industry, mainly the heavy industry, and they were supposed to be accomplished after a 5-year period, and most of them worked very, very well, okay? What were these objectives? Besides of this, the collectivization of land. How did they do it? Expropriating the property, so taking it by force, and force obligations of the workers to cultivate the land collectively. So there was no private property of the land in the Soviet Union. We have two types of collective farms. The sovkhoz, which is a Soviet-owned farm. The land was owned by the state and the workers were paid a wage to work this land. And also the kolkhoz, which is a cooperative, a collective-owned farm, in which the land was owned by the collective or a cooperative and the workers received part of the harvest as a wage. Okay? And these crops were used by the state for export in order to gain capital, so they could invest it in the industry, because the main concern of Stalin was the industrialization of the USSR. So he actually nationalized the existing industries and invested in the creation of new ones, mostly heavy industry and also the production of capital goods, the bienes de equipo, which are goods that are used in other factories, okay, such as machinery or weaponry. But he left aside the consumer goods industry, okay, the goods that the people ultimately use, textiles, footwear, electrical appliances, etc., etc. And also the construction of hydraulic works to increase the production of electricity. If you create a lot of industry, you need to power them, and the cheapest way or the easiest way to produce electricity is by building dams. Okay, so let's see some propaganda. Okay, this is propaganda about the kolkhoz. Okay, peasant woman to the kolkhoz, come with us to the kolkhoz, comrade, because many people refused this collectivization of the land, mainly the kulaks in Ukraine. What did it happen? Boom, 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 boom. You don't want to join the kolkhoz? Boom, or to Siberia. Here we have some propaganda of the 5-year plans and more about the 5-year plans and the construction of hydraulic works. Glory to Stalin, the great architect of communism. And lastly, about society, he aimed to establish social equality. He guaranteed free healthcare, education and housing for all citizens. Okay, However, there were differences between the governing elite with high incomes and the rest of the population living on a minimum wage. Okay, it was supposed to be a dictatorship of the proletariat, but there was a high class and the rest of the people. This high class was called the lo diré, de inteligencia, no, I forgot. Well, and these are some posters of or about education, because in the Soviet Union they gave a lot of importance to education and the teachers, like today. Next one is Italy and the Italian fascism. The fascism was a system of authoritarian government established by Benito Mussolini, the Bald, in Italy since 1922. The system of Italy was still a constitutional monarchy, with the king being Victor Emmanuel III, but this regime went through a post-war economic crisis with inflation, social unrest, strikes, and this situation made Mussolini to create at first in 1919 the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, the black shirts, los camisas negras, which were some kind of paramilitary militia which helped maintain the order mainly by killing workers or trade union leaders, and therefore fighting the strikes of the workers. And later, 2 years later, in 1921, Mussolini formed the National Fascist Party, Partito Nazionale Fascista. Here you have the logo with the fasces. These are the fasces, which is symbol of the old Roman Empire. And 1 year later, in 1922, since the government was unable to fight this social unrest, Mussolini led a march on Rome. A lot of fascist people, I think it's around 40,000 fascists or black shirts, they went walking to the capital, and they asked or forced the King Victor Emmanuel III to name Mussolini as the head of the government, which he did. And here starts the fascism in Italy. Okay, why there was this social unrest? Well, mainly because the Italians felt betrayed by the Allies after their victory in World War I. They were promised all of these territories, mostly here in the Adriatic coast, but they were given just a little bit here in the peninsula of Istria and some little islands. But the Italians wanted all the coast of the Adriatic Sea because there were some Italian population there. This is the march on Rome with Benito Mussolini, this guy here, and his black shirts, all of them walking towards Rome. And here in El Palazzo Quirinale, which was the headquarters of the government, here all the fascists asking the king to name Mussolini or to appoint Mussolini as the head of the government. And he did. Como para no hacerlo. This is Benito Mussolini. Here he was already bald. That's why he's wearing a cap. And this is Benito Mussolini with the king Victor Emmanuel. And if you want to see how charismatic was Benito Mussolini, here I have uploaded a couple of videos, no, not today, a couple of videos of Benito Mussolini's speeches in the Palazzo Venezia. No, me salta el copyright. And in the fascist Italy, Victor Emmanuel III was still the king, but the real leader was Mussolini, which was called Il Duce, the leader, which transformed the democratic state into a dictatorship with some measures. In 1926, 4 years later, 2 years after the March on Rome, he transferred all the power to himself. The only political party was the Partito Nazionale Fascista, and the parliament was replaced by the Grand Council of Fascism. So a council made up by members of the fascist party. In foreign policy, he tried to restore or to create an empire by conquering Abyssinia and Ethiopia in Africa, and later Albania in Europe. He intervened in the economy after the economic crisis of 1929, and he aimed to set up an autarky, una autarquía, which means that the country could be self-sufficient, so that the country did not depend on the imports to maintain themselves. The mines and the arms industry were nationalized and large-scale public works projects were begun, mostly highways. And in the social policies, he put an end to the unrest because he removed the workers' rights. So there are strikes, so let's ban the strikes. Boom! The trade unions are causing social unrest. We ban the trade unions. Very easy. This is the Grand Council of Fascism, and this is the expansion of the Italian Empire. This is, in red you have the Italian territories before the start of the World War II in 1939, Italy, Albania, Libya and Ethiopia and Somalia, and the Africa Orientale Italiana. And later during the World War II, Italy achieved to, or managed to conquer all these territories and part of Greece, part of France, Tunisia and half of Egypt during the Africa campaign. But they lost all these territories after the war. This is some propaganda about the autarky. Autarquia, Mussolini ha sempre ragione. Mussolini is always right. Very straightforward motto. And Mussolini set up or wrote his ideas in one book, The Doctrine of Fascism, in 1932, and you have here some fragments. Finally, the Nazi Germany, these ones. In Germany, after the fall of the Second Reich, after Versailles, a constitutional democracy was established, and this was called the Weimar Republic. Why? Because the constitution was signed in the city of Weimar. They faced a lot of problems. The payment of reparations, the occupation of the Ruhr, the economic crisis of 1929. We have studied this in the previous part of this unit, and this favored the rise of these extremist and nationalist parties, both the Nazis and the communists. But the communists, they tried to make a coup d'etat, but it failed in 1929. Rosa Luxemburg, and well, she was killed, and so on. But we are here to talk about the Nazis. Nazism was a system of dictatorship established by his charismatic leader Adolf Hitler. He was Austrian, by the way. He was known as the Führer, leader. Okay? It was a totalitarian regime, and it replaced the Weimar Democratic Republic in 1933. Why did it succeed? Because the humiliation the Germans felt over the territorial and economic conditions that the Treaty of Versailles imposed over them, and also the hyperinflation and the high unemployment, which the democratic government could not solve. So those are the main regions that explain the rise of Nazism. Here, this is a very this is some propaganda about the Germans who are trying to liberate themselves, to free themselves from the chains that the Treaty of Versailles had imposed over them. The charismatic leader, Adolf Hitler, ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer, one people, or one people, one empire, one leader. And he wrote, most of these ideas were set in this book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, Mi Lucha. Here you have some of the points of the Nazi manifesto, the Nazi Party manifesto in 1920, as you can see, against Versailles, against the Jews, against they claimed their territory back, etc, etc, etc. So, in 1921, Adolf Hitler, who had joined the National Socialist Party before, he became the leader of the Nazi Party, which name was National Socialist German Workers' Party. the NSDAP, the Nationalsozialistische Deutsches Arbeiterpartei in German, the Nazi party. And they used the SS, which was their paramilitary group alongside the SA, to attack the opposition and especially workers' parties, especially the communists. And their political program was based mainly on the rejection of the Treaty of Versailles, as we have seen in the text before. And by the way, this is a cap of an officer of the SS. So the Nazi party, they went to the elections of the Weimar Republic, but they only achieved success after the economic crisis of 1929. And they finally, Adolf Hitler was finally appointed as Chancellor in 1933. In Germany, the Chancellor is the president of the head of the government, the president of the Council of Ministers, okay? Not the head of the state, which was Hindenburg. He established a dictatorship with the following measures. 1 year later, when Hindenburg died, he was also named the head of the state, and he established the Third Reich, the Third Empire. The Nazi party became the only legal political party and persecuted anyone who opposed it, mainly the communists. In foreign policy, Hitler began an expansionist policy to recover all the German territories lost in the First World War. The territories that they had to give to Poland and mostly to France, Alsace and Lorraine. There was a great economic development. Why? Because of the public investment again. He set up a program of public works, mainly all the Deutsche Bahns, all the highways and the railways, and mostly the development of the arms industry. This was forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles, but Hitler didn't give. He didn't care. Okay, and the differentiating characteristics with the fascism is that the Nazis were extremely anti-Semitic. They were racist towards the Jews, and they were persecuted by the regime since 1933, mostly after the 1935 laws of Nuremberg. And here we have some episodes of the development of the Nazi regime that doesn't appear on the book, because the book is, you know how the book is, but I'm going to tell you something about them. First, in 1933, Hitler tried to seize power in a coup d'état in the so-called Beer Hall Putsch. A putsch es un golpe, a coup. El putsch de la cervecería de Múnich in 1933, but it failed and he spent some months in prison. And during this time in prison, he wrote the Mein Kampf. Here you have Hitler over there with this mustache like mine, with Nazi party members in 1930. These are the results of the elections in the Weimar Republic. In black you have the results of the NSDAP, the Nazi party, and you can see they got very few votes, but after the crisis of 1929, the easy solution, the Nazis. Boom, 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 boom. There were 3 elections in just, because the 1933 was in January, and in just 7 months there were 3 elections because they weren't able, even though they won, they weren't able to form a government because the other parties didn't want to. But finally, after 1933, they achieved it. Hitler, some text is missing here. Here, Hitler is being appointed Chancellor by the head of the state, Field Marshal Hindenburg, and they gained all the power after the fire on the Reichstag, the building in which the parliament gathered. On February 1933, he attributed the fire. He blamed the communists, so the communists were pursued, they were illegalized, and this eased the path to the Nazis to pass the Enabling Act of March 1933. This act, this law, allowed Hitler to legislate without the approval of the parliament, without the Reichstag, so he could pass the laws he wanted. And here starts the Nazi regime. And also he purged the SA. The SA were the paramilitary militias of the Nazi party, the brown shirts, but he not only persecuted his adversaries, his political adversaries, but he also within the Nazi party, and they were purged. This guy Ernest Röhm, which was the leader of the SA, alongside many other officials, they were purged, they were killed in the Night of the Long Knives, La Noche de los Cuchillos Largos, in 1934. Here you have a picture of these brown shirts parading in Berlin. After that, the SS were the most important Nazi militia, and here you have them in Nuremberg in 1935. By the way, they are wearing the same cap as me because these are officials. And regarding the Jews, they were attacked. We will study the Jews in the Holocaust part in the next unit. But the most important attack they suffered was the Night of the Broken Glass in 1938. Many buildings, stores, and synagogues were attacked, and some Jews were killed during this night. And also, Hitler was very, very charismatic, and he gave amazing speeches. If you want to see them, you can click the play button. And by the way, a curiosity, these speeches are in Vimeo because YouTube bans them. I don't know why. No. And the end. This is a painting by Hitler, because Hitler, before being a Nazi, he was a painter, and he tried to enter the Vienna Academy, but he was rejected. Who knows if he had been accepted? Maybe the World War II wouldn't have happened. But this is an dystopy. Bueno, pues ya está. Pues no me ha quedado tan largo como pensaba el vídeo. Bueno, pues esto es un resumen muy, muy breve, porque esto hay que darlo con más calma. Pero bueno, el libro es el que es y tampoco vamos a forzar la maquinaria, porque en el siguiente tema lo vais a flipar. Así que espero que este vídeo os haya servido de ayuda y muchas gracias por verlo, como siempre, y nos vemos en el próximo. Adiós. Auf Wiedersehen.